What happens when a country grows too fast but forgets to prepare for the future? In China, that future is already here, and it's revealing a worrying situation. Millions of elderly people are being left behind, living isolated in empty villages or surviving on minimal pensions. Some end up depending on charity to eat, without proper medical care or family support. Who takes care of them? Who makes sure they don't die of hunger or unattended illnesses? Projections indicate that, by 2040, China will have more than 400 million people over the age of 60, a number higher than the entire population of the United States. Is the country prepared to face this silent crisis? Does the government have a plan to avoid a social collapse? Today, you will see this hidden reality, a side of China that contrasts with the propaganda of technology and progress. Before we begin, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our publications. Without further ado, let's go. The first impression upon arriving in a Chinese metropolis like Beijing or Shanghai is that of an extremely advanced country. Imposing skyscrapers, wide avenues, electric cars everywhere, and a frenetic pace of modernity. In the midst of this whirlwind, everything is digital. Payments through mobile phones, driverless taxis, restaurants without physical menus, and high-speed internet. Between the icons of the past and technological vanguard, China seems to have reached an unquestionable level of development. However, one only needs to move away from the futuristic showcases to perceive a reality that does not fit into this image of progress. In less traveled alleys, the elderly sit in front of closed shops, staring into space. Others rummage through garbage cans, collecting bottles to sell and supplement insufficient income. And in the villages far from the metropolises, entire communities are made up almost exclusively of the elderly, with 70% of the population over 60 years old. That's when it hits you. There is a China within China. While the country showcases its technological advances, a contingent of millions of elderly people wonder how they will pay for their monthly medicines, or who will take care of them when their health fails. This problem is aggravated by one of the biggest dilemmas of modern Chinese society, the one-child policy and mass migration to the cities. For decades, this policy drastically reduced the number of young people available to care for the elderly. Many of these older people did not have children or only have one, who works miles away without the time or resources to care for their parents. With rapid urbanization, many young people left their hometowns in search of better opportunities, leaving behind parents and grandparents who now face old age alone. Respect for elders, a core value of Confucianism, clashed with the country's new social and economic dynamics. For centuries, the Chinese family structure was solid. A grandfather who needed help had several children and grandchildren nearby. The elderly were seen as guardians of knowledge and advisors to families. But this traditional structure was dismantled by the social and political changes of the 20th century. Today, the elderly, once revered for their role in society, have become a vulnerable population, increasingly abandoned. Alarm bells sounded decades ago, but were ignored. In the 1990s and early 2000s, experts were already warning that China was aging rapidly. But at that time, the government had other priorities: rapid economic growth, industrial expansion, and opening up to world trade. While Beijing and Shanghai were building their skyscrapers and boosting the technology sector, once vibrant villages began to transform into ghost towns, populated solely by the elderly. Empty houses, schools closed due to lack of students, and a growing number of elderly people living without any support. The problem was compounded by the falling birth rate. Fewer children are born, and more elderly people live longer. The question no one knew how to answer became inevitable. Who is going to support this aging population if the number of young people continues to decline? Who will care for millions of elderly people alone, without accessible hospitals and without a support network? The one-child policy had drastic and long-term consequences. If before a Chinese family had several siblings to share the responsibility of caring for their parents, today there is only one child, overloaded with work, family, and a high cost of living in the big cities. Many of these children end up moving abroad, leaving their parents without any support. There are cases of elderly people who no longer have living relatives or who have lost their children in accidents or illnesses. What happens to these people? The answer is harsh. Many live in extreme poverty, depending on very low pensions that barely cover basic expenses. In some regions, real nursing homes have emerged, such as temples and NGOs that take in abandoned or homeless elderly people. The most emblematic case is the Diang Temple in Fujian province, where a nun cares for dozens of elderly people without families. While these initiatives are heartwarming, they also highlight a serious problem. A country with one of the world's largest economies should not rely on donations to ensure the dignity of its elderly. China's pension system is another critical point. Each province manages its own funds, which creates glaring inequalities. In the wealthiest regions, such as Beijing and Shanghai, the elderly can count on a better structured support network. However, in the interior and northeast, the pension deficit threatens the sustainability of the system. Experts warn that if nothing changes, by 2035, the social security hole could become unsustainable. And it's not just a lack of money. There is a shortage of healthcare professionals specializing in geriatrics, physiotherapy, and palliative care. Many cities are trying to solve the problem by creating luxury nursing homes, accessible only to a small part of the population. Meanwhile, public institutions face endless waiting lists, and private ones have empty beds because most elderly people cannot afford them. The Chinese government is not completely ignoring the crisis. Since 2016, it has been piloting long-term care insurance in some cities, allowing urban workers to contribute to a fund that covers nursing care, nursing homes, and rehabilitation. However, the program is still far from being implemented nationwide. Furthermore, demand is growing faster than supply. The official plan foresees that, by 2025, all provinces will have a basic support system for the elderly, including home visits and the construction of more public residences. But critics point out that these measures are only a band-aid in the face of the magnitude of the problem. Meanwhile, makeshift solutions are emerging. NGOs distributing meals, volunteers visiting elderly people living alone, and daycare centers for the elderly, where they spend the day engaged in activities. These are commendable initiatives, but insufficient for a country of 1.4 billion people. What will happen when the crisis reaches its peak? Time is running out, and China faces a dilemma with no easy solution. On the one hand, the government is trying to rescue traditional values of family care and implement emergency measures. On the other hand, the country's social and economic reality makes this effort increasingly difficult. If China's rapid growth symbolizes a technological and prosperous future, its aging population represents an invisible but urgent problem. Loneliness, abandonment, and lack of assistance are the hidden face of this country in transformation. While the world admires its innovations, millions of elderly people struggle daily to maintain their dignity in a system that did not prepare them for aging. Located on the Asian continent, China occupies a vast territory in East Asia. With the third largest area in the world, it shares borders with 14 countries, making it the country with the longest land border. In terms of population, it is home to the second largest population in the world, representing approximately 20% of humanity. China is divided into 23 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, 4 central municipalities, and 2 special administrative regions, Hong Kong and Macau. In addition, it has more than 5,000 islands, with Taiwan being the largest of them, despite being considered by the Chinese government as an integral part of its territory. The big question is, how long does China have before this crisis reaches a point of no return? Faced with this scenario, the country finds itself at a real crossroads, a crossroads between tradition and urgency. On the one hand, the government insists on rescuing the traditional values of family care and proposes pilot programs to mitigate the problem, initiatives that, for the moment, have not yet materialized. On the other hand, time is moving inexorably forward. Every day that passes, more elderly people depend on special care, while the birth rate continues its dizzying fall, further aggravating the demographic challenge. If you thought China was just the country of TikTok, impressive turbines of economic growth, and dazzling lantern festivals, now you know that there is a gigantic side to this nation that rarely receives attention. A side marked by loneliness, abandonment, and the growing challenge of ensuring dignity for millions of people who dedicated their lives to work and who now face an uncertain future. If you liked today's video, please support us by liking and subscribing to the channel. Your support is what keeps us going. Don't forget to check out the video you have on the screen right now. I'm sure you'll find it fascinating. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.